So I kind of want to get the big picture right out of the gate.
Sure.
What do you think are the greatest challenges and opportunities facing Arizona, and what's your vision for the future of the state?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to join and have a conversation with you. Look, Gene, I think that as I look at the trajectory of our state and the reason why my parents immigrated to Arizona is because they believed that this was a place that you could get ahead if you were willing to work hard, if you were willing to treat others with respect, and if you were willing to play by the rules. And so as you think about the inequality throughout our state, some people are doing great. And then there's a huge gap of working families, of people who are struggling to succeed in our state. And so whether it be education, whether it be healthcare, whether it be our housing problem, shortage, finding quality, good jobs, taking care of our environment, these are all issues that as I travel throughout the state, I keep hearing from folks telling us, we want to be treated fairly, we want an equal shot to succeed, but the playing field isn't level for us. So that's what I think, for me, has been more of a reaffirming and confirming that belief that for some in Arizona, it's great. For many more, it's not so great. So we really have an obligation to focus on the issues that are impacting our diverse communities throughout our state and strengthening so that folks, I was at the San Carlos Apache tribe on Saturday, for example. They have very difficult issues that are not different from other communities in Arizona, and yet they feel left out. So everyone, I think, should have a champion, a leader that represents and works on their behalf. And that's what I'm committed to doing, and that's why I feel so energized about the work ahead.
That's wonderful. I love how you talk about communities, plural. For our community, for queer and trans Arizonans, I think the challenges lately have felt kind of overwhelming in some ways. But it's not always predictable how that's going to go. Arizona is sort of like a test bed for anti-LGBTQ legislation. But at the same time, we don't always have the worst outcomes. Other states pass and sign into law more worse bills than Arizona does. Where do you think those trends are coming from, and what do you think the majority of Arizonans actually value?
Yeah. So look, as I've spoken to Arizonans throughout our state, in the 15 counties and 22 tribes, I think where their heart lies is in the belief that we should be treating one another with that respect. But it's that loud minority that gets the attention. I was in Vail, Arizona a couple weeks ago, and after the event, I was the only Democrat that shows up to these forums. All the Republican candidates were there, and then me. And there's a mother that comes up to me and says, I moved to Vail, and I want to thank you for standing up, because I spoke about our obligation within our LGBTQ plus diversity, inclusion, anti-discrimination policy that we launched. It says, thank you for speaking up about that, because my child is a trans youth, and she's been bullied throughout her school career to the extent that now that she's graduated from high school, doesn't know if she wants to take the next step and go to either community college or university. These are the type of emotional conversations that I have with Arizonans, because the obligation of government should be to stand up.
Yes.
Should be to stand up for those that are most vulnerable, and trans youth today in Arizona are the ones that are bullied and picked on. And so that's what we have an opportunity to do. And that's what I hear from Arizonans. Arizonans have a good heart. We just have to make sure that someone actually captures that emotion and is working on their behalf to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to succeed. That is the beauty of our people. And we need a leader now that doesn't pit people against one another to push their political agenda. Yeah. I think people are tired of that. I take that back. I don't think people are tired. I know people are tired of it. And so now we need a champion, Gene, that actually is going to wake up every day and figure out how do we make policies that actually help improve people's lives. Yeah. From the most vulnerable to those that are looking for opportunities to get ahead so that their families can flourish, so that they themselves can flourish. And so that's what reaffirms. When I get up in the morning, that's what I think about. how are we helping the most vulnerable succeed in this state and not pitting, one group, one community against another? That's our challenge. But I think it's a great opportunity too.
I work with so many wonderful mothers of trans kids, and I think I actually want to ask kind of the same question that mother asked you. There's a lot of context right now after the Dobbs decision about Roe v. Wade, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, where I think LGBTQ Americans, and especially in Arizona, we're looking at this really uncertain legal reality. The Arizona state constitution still has a definition of marriage that's, in the event of the Supreme Court overturning Obergefell, would mean gay marriage wouldn't be an option anymore in Arizona. So I think, just like that mother asked, I kind of want to ask, as governor, what would you do to secure Arizona's fundamental rights?
So first of all, we got to stand up every single day to make sure that everyone's rights are protected. In our Article 30, we've got to make sure that either we have people in our state legislature willing to work with us, or I will veto any legislation that further deteriorates an individual's right to choice, an individual's right to marriage, an individual's right and freedoms and liberties in our state. So this is the task at hand today: electing people to that legislature that are going to work with me. If they don't work, if we don't succeed in that first step, then I will veto any legislation. And number two, we need to put it back into the state constitution and refer this question to the voters, because I think over 60% of Arizona voters are on our side on this issue. And so we've got to make sure that either the legislature understands that the loud minority is getting the attention and they're getting away with it because we don't have a governor that's willing to settle them down and make sure that they are working with our diverse communities of our state. And if that does not work, then we're going to refer it to the ballot and let the voters decide, because I know that that's where the voters are. They're on the side of inclusion, of diversity, and accepting one another, because I go back to the same thing that my parents, why they came here: treat people with respect. If we treat people with respect, we win.
Yeah. And I know that that's what Arizonans really want and have in their hearts, because I think over the past decade what we've seen is this kind of widening gulf between how cities are protecting LGBT rights and how the state is not just not protecting, but often actively attacking LGBT rights. And I wonder, working in the state government, how would you approach healing that divide and kind of bringing together those different levels of government to work in a more productive and constructive way?
Well, look, early last year in my campaign, I released our anti-discrimination, diversity, inclusion, and equity priorities. And part of it means that any act of discrimination will not be tolerated, and we will implement a zero tolerance policy on discrimination for our state government, but also for any employee, employer, vendor, service provider that does work with the government. And then we push that policy out. That's the best way that I know from my experience when I was mayor in Nogales, that I did that 21 years ago with the city of Nogales policy. This was 21 years ago. This was the year 2001. And here we are. And so now we have an opportunity to make that to broaden that and make sure that those protections not only are in place from a state government policy, but then everyone else that does business and works for or with the state government. And then we begin to have that permeate throughout each one of our 15 counties and 22 tribes, 93 cities. And so I think this is why one of the first things that we're going to send as governor to the legislature is an anti-discrimination and inclusion policy, so that we repeal not only the discriminatory acts in our state from a state policy perspective, right, but that we encourage the work that so many advocacy organizations have done. We're now in 9 cities, but we've got to make this statewide. The protections that people enjoy, the diverse communities enjoy throughout our state. That's my commitment. But it's interesting. We shouldn't have to, right, be overly talking about this. Should be common sense.
Yes.
Sadly, there's no sense that's common to a lot of people here. And so that's my commitment.
Wonderful. You've talked a lot about what you could do with a legislature that will work with you, a legislature that won't. It's likely that you might end up with a legislature that's in some ways incompatible with your policy goals. So I think there's a real question of, besides vetoing, what could you do to work with maybe a Republican-controlled legislature to safeguard LGBTQ rights?
Yeah, so I'm committed to making sure that we, through executive orders, as much and as many protections that we can implement, we're going to do by executive order. And then we're going to be an activist administration. And what that means is that we're going to get out to the communities. This is what I was sharing with folks in Vail, in Duncan, in Safford, at the San Carlos Apache, yesterday in Prescott, and all throughout the state. This is how I'm going to lead. It's no surprise why I'm the only candidate that is traversing the state, having conversations in living rooms and gymnasiums and auditoriums and fairgrounds all over the state with people who are willing to listen and who have that compassion for one another. That's how we're going to do it. There's not going to be a difference between how I run my campaign and how I'm going to run government, out and about with the people of Arizona. So the question is, how are you going to convince people like Wendy Rogers, hateful, chaotic individual, to move in our direction, and everyone else who might be a little less extreme than her? The way we're going to do it is we're going to go make our case to the people who they supposedly represent. Because when I talk to those people, they have a heart just like you and I. But we've got to make the case to them. A majority of those individuals, Gene, I can tell you, don't even know what she's espousing here at the state capitol. This is not the place that we're going to make decisions. We're going to make decisions out in the community. That's what's so different about my campaign. That's why I'm proud to call it a grassroots campaign and a grassroots organization, because all it means is that we're going to return the policy-making functions of our state to the hands of the people. We're going to go make the case there. So that's how we do it. If they don't want to work with us, fine. But we're going to give it our best shot. And if then they refuse, then out we go. Let them get tired of having a governor set up shop in Safford or in Globe or in Prescott. Finally, someone's going to give. And it's not going to be me. Someone's going to say, okay, let's get this governor out of Safford. Enough, we'll give him the vote. So that's what it means. It's that activism. It's that activist gene that you have as an immigrant, you have as kind of the work ethic that nothing is given to us. We have to work twice as hard for it, and we've got to show up. This is part of our leadership. You have to show up. And I'm the only one showing up. And I'm proud of it. Yeah. Look, if people abandon the field, they don't deserve to have our vote, our confidence, and our attention.
That kind of citizen-based advocacy is pretty core to our work, and we know that it does work.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about diverse communities and the disparate threads of political thought in Arizona. Something I'm really interested in general, talking to people, is the history of Arizona politics. And so I was wondering, is there a particular leader in the history of Arizona that you really want to emulate or that you look up to?
Yeah, so look, I had the opportunity to work with Janet Napolitano. I met her actually during the campaign. We did a campaign stop when I was working with Vice President Gore at the electrical union in Tucson. That's where I first met her. She was running for Attorney General. And so a lot of these threads come together of having a legislature that is of the opposite party, making sure that you're prioritizing education and equality principles within government, and then not refusing to back down when it gets tough. And so because I worked with her, because I met her as I was developing my own career and trajectory in politics, she's definitely someone that I look to for advice and counsel. And just you when you see people close, you kind of pick up traits. But then I've got to also tell you, Raul Castro, the first and only Latino governor of this state, 1974, came from Mexico, Cananea, crossed through Douglas, and became our first and only Latino governor. It takes courage to do what he did. It takes courage to open the path for others. So now we've got to make history together so that there's two Latino governors in the history of Arizona. So I would say those two.
Wonderful. As governor, as like the executive for the state, you would have a lot of responsibility for how we answer the biggest policy questions that we're facing. So I'm really interested in how do you make decisions and who do you include in your decision-making process?
First of all, it's experts. It's the best people in whatever field you are encountering. And that's just the background. I was mayor at 21, and I was elected at 21. I was mayor at 22, and the first crisis that we had as a country was 9/11, September 11th of the year 2001. And what I began to quickly learn, I didn't have time to be figuring this out, right? Is that you've got to surround yourself with the best people, with the experts, not politicize issues of grave importance. And so that's been the trajectory of my career, is surrounding yourself with the knowledge that it takes and understanding that you don't know it all. But there are people available to you as a leader that have that expertise. And so that's how I will do it. That's how I will lead. But you know what? The fundamental question that I will push all of our department directors, first of all, that it's diverse and it is inclusive of the tapestry of our state. Diversity is key. From age to background to belief, that's got to be the makeup of my administration, from cabinet officials to directors and all political appointees. You have to represent the people, number one. But number two, in Nogales, we called it the Nana rule. Nana means grandmother. And so the fundamental question that you ask yourself when you're going to make a decision, what would my grandmother think on either side of this decision?
Yeah.
Because if you kind of personalize it, then it allows you the clarity to wipe out any of that political garbage that might be going on. And so if you think, what would my grandmother think if I told her that I was going to decide this issue and where it fell? And if the answer in your heart is she would think I'm crazy, then you shouldn't be doing it. And this is what I got to ask all these politicians who get elected and then don't do the right thing because they want to get reelected, or they want to please their donors, or they want to please the political class because they want to fit in. No. What would your grandmother think on that decision? And so it sounds very basic, but this was exactly the thing that I recently heard from the now deputy chief of staff, deputy city manager in Nogales. He was a police chief when I was mayor, but he reminded us on an interview that we did that, he said, Marco instilled in us that when a decision was a tough one or, iffy, just reflect and think, what would Nana think? So that's what we got to do in every decision in government. Reinstitute that common sense. A lot of these things aren't difficult, but if you're pandering to political parties, you're going to get in trouble. So I think people have been hurt enough. Let's get back to basics. Let's bring people together. Let's treat one another with respect.
Yeah.
And if we do that, Arizona will be better. And then I'll be happy.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for speaking with me today.
You bet.
We've got the primaries right around the corner, I think about 3 to 4 weeks, less than 4 weeks. Is there a message that you'd like to close with to share to the voters of Arizona?
Yeah, so look, if we're going to restore that promise of Arizona, the promise that says that if you come here, you work hard, you treat people with respect, we can get ahead together. If we want to get to that point, once again, in our politics, in our communities, in our schools, in our jobs, in our healthcare, and housing, in our issues of treating one another with respect, equality, treating people with the dignity that they deserve, then get out and vote. The stakes are too high. We have to get out and vote. Ballots are in the mail or on countertops across this state. And if we want to make a difference, obviously, I ask you to vote for me. But we also need to vote for Democrats up and down the ballot so that we send good people to the legislature. But the most important and fundamental point, if you want a better state, you got to participate and you got to vote. If you don't vote, let's not complain, because we're going to get either Carrie Lake or someone worse on that side. Let's not take the chance. Let's make the right decision.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Thanks.